A woman who cheats always leaves these signs, not because she is careless, but because no one who strays does so without first whispering in silence, waiting to be heard. This isn't just about infidelity. This is about emotional disconnect, about the growing gap between who she is and who she pretends to be. The truth is, a woman doesn't just wake up one day and decide to betray love. It begins slowly, subtly, like a garden dying from drought. The eye contact fades. The laughter turns scripted. Her silence becomes louder than her words. You ask, "Is something wrong?" She smiles and says, "I'm fine." But her soul is already packing its bags. Her distance is the first sign. And you feel it, not in grand gestures but in the small, invisible ways. Love starts slipping through the cracks. The phone is suddenly always face down. Her time is filled with unexplained delays. She becomes more invested in her reflection than your conversations. But more than that, her emotional presence vanishes. That's the real betrayal. Not just the body, but the absence of the soul. Esther Perel, the world-renowned therapist, once said that people cheat not because they want to leave their partner, but because they want to leave the version of themselves they've become. Think about that. Cheating isn't always about a lack of love. It's about a longing for aliveness, for lost identity, for recognition in someone else's eyes. The signs are never just in text messages or late nights. They're in the hunger in her voice when she talks about someone new. They're in her newfound energy, not drawn from you but from an invisible thread connecting her to a secret world. And yet, we ignore it. Because facing the truth is harder than pretending nothing's changed. But here's the truth you need to hear today. If you see the signs, don't respond with anger. Respond with awareness. The woman who cheats isn't just revealing a flaw in herself. She's reflecting something deeper in the relationship. Were you listening before the silence? Were you holding her when she began to disappear? This isn't blame. This is wake up. Because life isn't just about keeping someone, it's about staying connected. It's about constantly choosing each other in a world full of distractions, illusions, and unmet needs. A woman who cheats doesn't want to be caught. Deep down, she wants to be seen. She wants to be asked the hard questions, not out of suspicion, but out of care. Are you happy? Do you feel loved? What do you need that I haven't noticed? These aren't confrontations. They are doors to truth. Because when connection dies, betrayal finds space to breathe. But if you've been cheated on, don't drown in shame. Don't chain your worth to someone else's choices. Instead, rise. Rise not because you were wronged, but because you are still worthy of love, still capable of trust, still deserving of a connection that doesn't require betrayal to feel alive. Don't let the wound define you. Let it refine you. Use the pain not as a reason to hate, but as fuel to grow. You don't need revenge, you need renewal. Esther Perel reminds us that affairs are often about desire not just for another person but for another version of ourselves. So if you're the woman tempted to cheat, pause. Ask yourself, what am I missing? What am I aching for? What part of me have I silenced for the sake of peace? Because the cost of betrayal is not just the breaking of a heart. It is the breaking of trust, the unraveling of self-respect, and the creation of shame. You don't need to cheat to feel alive. You don't need another body to feel seen. What you need is courage, the courage to speak before you stray, the courage to confront emptiness, not escape it, the courage to choose truth, even when it trembles. Real power is not in hiding, it is in confronting the storm and choosing to dance in it. If you've been betrayed, let this be your transformation. Let it be the moment you stop begging to be enough and started believing that you already are. Let it be the moment you decided not to chase what broke you, but to build something that never needs to be hidden. You deserve someone who doesn't make you question your place. You deserve someone who chooses you fully, loudly, always. If you're the one tempted, understand this temptation isn't weakness. It's a signal. It's your soul telling you something is missing. But acting on it without understanding it is like treating the symptom and killing the cure. Dig deeper. Speak bravely. Don't cheat your way out of pain. Heal your way through it. A woman who cheats always leaves these signs, not because she wants to be discovered, but because part of her is screaming for someone to notice she's drowning. Don't just be the person who catches the lie. Be the one who listens before it becomes one. In a world that rewards silence with chaos, choose to speak, to see, to feel. Love is not immune to betrayal, but it is forged in truth. And when truth is honored, even the broken pieces can build something stronger. So wherever you are, hurt, healing, tempted, torn, remember this, the signs are not just warnings, they are invitations to listen, to understand, to grow, and above all to love, not blindly but bravely. A woman who cheats always leaves these signs, not because she is reckless or malicious, but because something deep within her has already begun to unravel. She doesn't cheat for the thrill of secrecy or the excitement of betrayal. She cheats because something vital has gone missing. Sometimes in the relationship, sometimes within herself. Before the act of infidelity ever takes place, the signs start to emerge in small, almost invisible ways. And while the world may rush to condemn her, what we often fail to do is pause long enough to understand what those signs are truly saying. They are not just signals of betrayal. They are cries for attention, whispers of unmet needs, echoes of forgotten dreams, and shadows of loneliness that no longer fit inside the smile she wears every day. At first the signs seem harmless. She becomes quieter, more distracted, but you chalk it up to stress or work. She spends more time on her phone. But we live in a digital world, right? You convince yourself it's nothing. Her eyes stop lighting up during conversations with you. She laughs at your jokes, but the laughter lacks depth. She hugs you, but the embrace doesn't linger. These are not just behavioral shifts. They are emotional driftings. Her soul is beginning to look for a connection elsewhere because it feels unseen and unheard where it currently resides. And this is where the misunderstanding often begins. The partner might ask, "Is she unhappy with me?" But it's not always about you, it's about her. As Esther Perel often says, affairs are less about sex and more about desire. The desire to feel wanted, alive, important, visible. Sometimes the woman who cheats isn't seeking a better lover. She's seeking a better version of herself, one that she lost in the roles she played: mother, wife, caretaker, provider. Over time she forgets the girl who dreamed, the woman who laughed with abandon, the soul that once felt passionate and bold. So when another person shows her a reflection of that forgotten self, it can be intoxicating. It's not him she's addicted to. It's the version of herself that she becomes in his presence. And that's why the signs are not just about late nights or locked phones. The real signs live in her emotional energy. She stops fighting with you, not because everything is okay, but because she's given up. The fire that once erupted in arguments has turned to ash. There's no more effort to fix what's broken. That's a sign. She doesn't nag anymore about the dishes or your late replies. She simply doesn't care like she used to. That's a sign. She finds joy in dressing up again, not for you but for something or someone else. That's a sign. Her playlist changes, her perfume shifts, her phone habits evolve. Little signs, barely noticeable unless you're paying close attention. And by the time you finally do, she's emotionally checked out. But here's the harder truth. A woman doesn't cheat in a vacuum. The signs she leaves behind are often signs she gave before she ever strayed. Maybe she tried to talk. Maybe she told you she felt lonely. Maybe she said she missed being desired. Maybe she cried at night, not because of you, but because of the growing emptiness between you. And maybe, just maybe, she felt like no one was listening. That is the most tragic sign of all. Not the act of betrayal, but the loneliness that preceded it. Not the lies told to cover her tracks, but the truths she tried to share that were ignored. And if you are the one who's been betrayed, it's easy to get consumed by pain. It's easy to ask, why wasn't I enough? But the truth is, infidelity is rarely about you not being enough. It's about her not feeling enough in herself. You didn't fail her, but something failed within her. Something she couldn't explain. Something she perhaps didn't even understand. And yes, her choices hurt. Yes, they were wrong. But understand, the signs she left behind were opportunities for conversation, for reconnection, for healing. They weren't just warnings of disaster. They were invitations to pay attention. Now, if you are the woman tempted to cheat, if you're reading this and your heart feels exposed, let this be your mirror. You are not wrong for desiring passion. You are not evil for wanting to feel seen. But you do have a choice. Don't betray your values in order to chase what's missing. Confront what's missing with truth. Talk to your partner before you turn to someone else. Tell him, I feel invisible, or I don't recognize myself anymore. Be brave enough to ask for what you need. Cheating might feel like the shortcut to freedom, but it's a trap that costs more than you imagine. You don't need to sleep with someone else to feel alive. You need to rediscover your own soul and bring it back into the light. And if the relationship is truly over, then end it with honesty. Let the door close with dignity. Betrayal doesn't just break trust, it breaks something inside you too. It chips away at your self-respect, your identity, your peace. Even if no one finds out, you know. And carrying that secret becomes a burden. Freedom doesn't come from cheating, it comes from courage. Courage to tell the truth. Courage to face what's broken. Courage to say, this isn't working, before it's too late. The woman who cheats and leaves signs is not evil. She is human. She is hurting. She is searching. But that search, if done in darkness, leads to destruction. If done in light, it can lead to growth. And that's what Esther Perel teaches us over and over again. Relationships don't break in a moment. They erode over time, and every sign a woman leaves is a breadcrumb not to betrayal, but to the deeper story underneath. So if you are in a relationship right now and you sense something shifting, don't wait for proof of betrayal. Act on the signs, not with suspicion, but with curiosity. Ask, where are we drifting? Ask, what have you been afraid to tell me? Ask, what would make you feel alive again? These questions can save you. They can pull you both out of silence and into truth. And if it's too late, if the betrayal has already happened, don't use it to destroy yourself. Use it to rebuild. Let it teach you what kind of love you deserve. Let it show you what conversations you'll never postpone again. Let it remind you that your worth is not defined by someone else's choices. You are still whole, still powerful, still capable of love that is honest, open, and brave. A woman who cheats always leaves these signs, not because she wants to be exposed, but because somewhere deep down she's hoping someone will notice before it's too late. So notice, speak, heal, choose love, not just in the beginning, but again and again, even when it's hard, even when it's messy, even when it means confronting uncomfortable truths. Because in that truth, you don't just save the relationship, you save yourself. Esther Perel teaches us something that shatters conventional thinking, that cheating is not always about a lack of love, but about a longing for desire, a craving for vitality, a search for identity. This is one of the most important and uncomfortable truths about relationships. A woman who cheats might still love her partner deeply. She may not want to leave him, or even stop the life they've built together. She may be a devoted mother, a responsible partner, a loyal friend, and yet still cheat. Why? Because love and desire are not always the same. Because routine can kill excitement. Because responsibility can suffocate the parts of us that want to feel wild, free, and alive. And when that need for aliveness goes unmet, when desire is buried beneath laundry, bills, and polite dinner conversations, she may start to seek it elsewhere, not out of malice, but out of a desperate hunger to feel something real again. This is the paradox Esther speaks of, that people stray not always because something is wrong with their partner, but because something feels wrong within themselves. The betrayal isn't just of a spouse, it's often of the self that once felt seen, that once glowed with confidence and curiosity, that once laughed with reckless abandon. Over time, that self fades, not because the relationship is bad, but because life wears us down. We become caretakers instead of lovers. We manage schedules instead of nurturing dreams. We perform our roles, but forget who we are behind them. And then one day, someone comes along and awakens something. They look at her in a way that reminds her of who she used to be. They listen, they notice, they desire, and suddenly a dormant flame ignites. But this isn't a defense of cheating. It's not an excuse. It's an explanation. It's an invitation to understand the complexity beneath the surface. Because if we look only at the act, at the text, the lies, the secret meetings, we miss the deeper story. We miss the emotional context, the quiet decay that often precedes the loud betrayal. And if we can't understand it, we can't grow from it. We can't prevent it from happening again. We can't rebuild anything meaningful if we only focus on punishment instead of understanding. When a woman cheats, it often reveals a fracture in identity. She may feel trapped in roles that no longer serve her, expected to be everything to everyone but herself. She may be deeply admired for her strength and devotion, but rarely asked how she's doing on the inside. She may give endlessly to her family, to her work, to her partner, until she feels like an empty shell. And instead of reaching out, she goes inward, she withdraws, she fantasizes, she disconnects. And when the opportunity for an affair arises, it feels like oxygen, it feels like freedom, it feels like rebirth. And that's why it's so dangerous, because it's not just about another person, it's about who she becomes when she's with them. We must talk about this, no matter how hard it is, because if you are in a relationship and you ignore the emotional needs of your partner, if you stop asking questions, if you stop being curious, if you stop trying to understand their evolving desires, you are creating a void. And voids get filled, sometimes in healthy ways, sometimes in secret ways. The affair often begins long before the first kiss. It begins in the unanswered questions, in the glances avoided, in the silent resentments, in the emotional distance that grows slowly like rust on metal. So what do? We learn to have difficult conversations before the damage is done. We learn to talk not just about chores and schedules, but about longings and fears and identity. We ask our partners, what makes you feel alive? What do you miss about your younger self? Is there something you've been afraid to tell me? And we listen without defensiveness, without interruption, without judgment, because these conversations are not threats. They are lifelines. They are opportunities to reconnect before it's too late. And if you're the one who has cheated or is tempted to, then stop and reflect. What are you really looking for? Is it passion? Is it recognition? Is it autonomy? Is it escape? And why do you feel you can't find those things within your current life? These are the questions that matter. Because if you cheat without understanding what you're truly missing, you will carry that same emptiness into the next relationship and the next. The affair may give temporary relief, but it will never offer permanent fulfillment if you don't face the root cause. The truth is, most affairs are less about sex and more about emotion. They're about feeling wanted, feeling seen, feeling significant. They're about rediscovering a version of ourselves that we miss. And that's why they are so powerful and so painful, because they show us what's possible, but they also remind us of what's broken. And the fallout is devastating, not just for the betrayed partner, but for the betrayer too. Because guilt doesn't just live in the shadow of the act. It lingers in the soul. It questions your integrity, your values, your ability to ever be fully trusted again. And rebuilding from that requires immense courage, humility, and honesty. But here's the good news: relationships can survive betrayal. They can even grow stronger because of it. If both people are willing to do the work, if both people are willing to dig deep, to face uncomfortable truths, to rebuild not just trust but connection, not just routine but intimacy, not just forgiveness but understanding. And that work begins with empathy, with seeing each other not just as partners, but as evolving individuals, with remembering that even in love, we can feel lost, and that it's okay to admit it. If you're the partner who's been cheated on, you may feel like the world has collapsed, like your heart has been ripped out, like everything you believed in was a lie, and that pain is real. Don't let anyone minimize it, but also know this: you are not broken, you are not unworthy, you are not weak, you are still whole, you are still capable of giving and receiving love. This moment, this wound, does not define you. And if you choose to stay, it doesn't make you foolish, it makes you courageous. And if you choose to leave, it doesn't make you bitter, it makes you strong. If you're the one who strayed, take responsibility, not just for the action, but for the emotional distance that led to it. Own your choices, but don't drown in shame. Shame will keep you stuck. Guilt, when used properly, can guide you toward healing, but shame will bury you. So learn, grow, be better, not just for your partner, but for yourself. And if you're both willing to do the work, know this: real healing is possible. But it requires truth, it requires time, it requires a radical kind of honesty. Not just about what happened, but about what's been happening for a long time. Healing is not about returning to who you were before. It's about building something new together. It's about creating a relationship where both people feel seen, valued, desired, and alive. Because in the end, every relationship will be tested. Every love will be challenged. But the ones that survive are not the ones without pain. They are the ones where two people choose to face the pain together. Where they choose to grow, even through the fire. Where they choose each other. Not just when it's easy, but especially when it's hard. So don't be afraid of the truth. Don't be afraid to ask the hard questions. Don't be afraid to admit that something is missing, because pretending everything is fine won't save your relationship, but honesty just might. And in that honesty, you don't just save the love, you save yourselves. A woman who cheats often carries a dual burden: the betrayal itself and the unbearable silence of her emotional truth that preceded it. Long before she crosses the line, she lives in a space where her voice has become small, her needs minimized, her pain invisible even to herself. She may walk through her days in a blur of responsibility, trying to hold up the image of a perfect partner, a nurturing mother, a successful woman. But inside something aches. Something begins to break. This is one of the most neglected signs we fail to notice: how a woman's emotional truth is silenced for so long that, when she finally seeks to be heard, it's through an act that screams. She may not have had the words, or she may have had them, but they were dismissed. "You're overthinking," they said. "You're being too sensitive," they said. So she learned to keep quiet. She learned to shrink. But deep down, her unmet needs grew louder, clawing at her from the inside. And when the affair happens, it's often not a spontaneous betrayal, it's a response to being emotionally erased over time. This is the critical keynote in Esther Perel's philosophy that changes everything. The affair is rarely about the partner, it's about the self. The woman doesn't just step out of a relationship, she's stepping out of an identity she no longer recognizes. She is seeking not just a person, but a mirror, someone who reflects back a part of her she has lost. That's why so many affairs feel like awakenings, why they seem intoxicating, why they're described as moments of feeling, seen for the first time in years. It's not just about the other person. It's about her being seen as something more than the role she's been playing. Not mom, not wife, Not provider, but woman. Desirable, fascinating, alive. This kind of recognition is powerful. And when it's missing in the primary relationship, it becomes a magnetic force. This doesn't justify the cheating, but it explains the emotional environment that makes it possible. Think about how many women spend years prioritizing everyone else, putting the kids first, putting the partner first, putting her career, her friends, her responsibilities, all of it first, until one day she looks in the mirror and no longer sees herself, not the fire she once had, not the dreams, not the sparkle. She has become someone else entirely, efficient, reliable, selfless, and also quietly dying inside. No one asks her, how's your soul doing? No one says, you matter outside of your function. The ones around her appreciate what she does, but not who she is. And in that absence of being witnessed, she becomes emotionally starved. And like any starvation, the moment food is offered, attention, affection, curiosity, she consumes it with intensity, sometimes without judgment. And that is how the affair begins. Now let's talk about the silence. Because this is one of the most dangerous parts of any relationship, emotional silence. It's not just the absence of words, it's the absence of presence. It's the absence of interest in each other's inner worlds. It's the days when you talk about logistics but not love. When you discuss bills but not beliefs. When you live together, sleep together, eat together, but don't actually see each other anymore. In that silence, a woman's emotional reality becomes something she deals with alone. She cries in the bathroom so no one sees. She smiles at dinner even though her spirit is breaking. She says, I'm tired, instead of, I'm falling apart. And that emotional loneliness becomes a breeding ground for infidelity, not because she's immoral, but because she's human. Humans are wired for connection. And when genuine connection dies, we begin to seek it in shadows. So how does one listen to the silence? By being emotionally curious, by asking deeper questions than, how was your day? By noticing shifts in energy, by realizing that the absence of complaint is not always peace. It can be resignation. By understanding that when a woman stops arguing, it might not be because she's happy. It might be because she's given up. This silence is a scream. And if you're emotionally present, you'll hear it. But most people aren't. Most people assume everything's fine because there's no visible conflict. But silence isn't always calm. It can be the quiet before a storm. Or worse, the quiet after the heart has already left. Esther Perel challenges us to move beyond the surface. She urges couples to stop treating affairs as the disease and start seeing them as a symptom of disconnection, a symptom of emotional neglect, a symptom of dreams forgotten. The woman who cheats might be telling a story that no one was willing to listen to before. Her betrayal becomes her voice, but at a devastating cost. Because when the affair comes to light, the focus becomes the act, not the context. Everyone talks about the lie, but not about what drove her to live in secrecy. They ask, how could she do this? But not, what had she been carrying in silence all this time? And this is the deeper pain that often goes unacknowledged, the pain that she tried to stay, the pain that she wanted it to work, the pain that she waited maybe for months, maybe for years, for someone to notice she was disappearing. But no one came, no one asked, no one saw. So eventually she stopped hoping, she stopped speaking. And in that emotional void, she crossed a line, not out of hatred, not out of vengeance, but out of hunger. That is the tragedy. Not the betrayal itself, but the fact that her emotional death went unnoticed until it erupted into action. If you are someone who has been cheated on, this is a hard truth to hold, because the betrayal feels so personal, so cruel, so intimate. And it is. It hurts like hell. It shakes your foundation. It breaks your trust. But if you want to move forward, whether together or apart, you have to look at the full picture, not to excuse, but to understand. What conversations weren't being had, what emotional needs were unspoken, what signs were ignored, overlooked, dismissed. The affair may have been the earthquake, but what were the cracks that led up to it? Healing comes not just from punishing the betrayal, but from understanding the silence that made it possible. And if you're the woman reading this who feels herself slipping into that silence, who feels the ache of invisibility growing stronger, this is your wake-up call. Not to cheat, not to betray, but to speak, to tell your truth before it turns into a scream, to say, I'm not okay, to say I feel unseen, to say, I need more than this life is giving me right now. That kind of honesty takes immense courage, but it's the only way to avoid the kind of choices that destroy. Don't wait for someone to read your silence. Speak your fire before it burns your house down. And if you are the partner, hear this. Being faithful isn't just about not cheating. It's about staying emotionally connected. It's about showing up with presence. It's about being curious, not just about what your partner does, but about who they are becoming. People change, needs evolve. and the relationship must evolve with them or it will quietly begin to rot. Don't be afraid to ask, who are you now? Don't be afraid to say, tell me what you're afraid to say. Those conversations are messy, they're uncomfortable, but they are the lifeblood of true intimacy. Because what you don't talk about will come out eventually through distance, resentment, or betrayal. The woman who cheats is not simply a villain. She is a human being who reached a breaking point, who felt more alive in a moment of dishonesty than she had in years of silence. And yes, it was wrong. But if we only judge the action and never examine the emotion beneath it, we miss the lesson. We miss the opportunity to grow. We miss the invitation to transform not just our relationships, but our entire way of loving. So let's tell the whole story. Let's talk about the unmet needs, the emotional silence, the longing for identity, the hunger to be seen. Let's talk about how easily love turns into logistics and how that can slowly starve the soul. Let's talk about the bravery it takes to tell the truth before it becomes betrayal. And above all, let's learn to listen, not just with our ears, but with our hearts. Because when a woman cheats, it's often the final act in a story no one cared to read. But we can write a new story, one where truth is spoken before it explodes, one where emotional presence matters more than performance, one where partners see each other fully, not just as roles but as evolving souls. That kind of love is rare, that kind of connection takes work, but it's possible and it's worth it.